Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has called reported Israeli raids on a church in Gaza unacceptable. The attack on Gaza's sole church has reportedly killed 2 and left several injured, according to doctors at the Al Ali hospital in Gaza City. Russia has reportedly handed over the bodies of 1,000 dead soldiers to Kyiv, according to negotiators. It comes amid continued calls for peace in the war that has seen intensified strikes reported by both sides. Meanwhile, lawmakers in Ukraine have confirmed Yulia Svyrydenko as the new Prime Minister, confirming a reshuffle of Ukrainian politics announced by Volodymyr Zelensky. Claim by the Wall Street Journal suggesting that the tone of the pilot moments before the Ahmedabad air crash points towards the captain's actions has been refuted by several groups. Investigations into the deadly crash that killed 275 people are ongoing. At least 60 people have died after a devastating blaze inside a shopping mall in eastern Iraq. The fire engulfed a 5-story building in Quds City, with an investigation underway as a 3-day period of mourning is announced. Military drills have been taking place in Taiwan, with Taipei coming to a standstill as Chinese invasion protocols are tested. Tensions have intensified between the self-governed Taiwan and China, who have spoken consistently about reunification. Media reports suggest that US President Donald Trump is set to visit Pakistan in September. US intervention relating to the India-Pakistan tensions, while disputed, was hailed by Trump, with trade another potential topic of discussion. And a Trump-backed bill cutting billions of dollars of funds in foreign aid and broadcasting has been passed through the Senate, who voted 51 to 48 in favour. This vote is another win for Trump in his push to cut spending. But we start this hour in the Middle East, as Gaza's only Catholic church has reportedly been struck during an Israeli raid. That, according to the Latin Patriarchy of Jerusalem. The strike hit the Holy Family Church on Thursday, injuring several people, including the parish priest, Father Gabriel Romanelli. A statement from the Patriarchate confirmed the injuries, but said no fatalities had yet been officially confirmed. The Israeli military, when contacted by AFP, said it was looking into the incident. Meanwhile, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni condemned the strike, calling it unacceptable and warning against further attacks on civilians and religious sites. Italian media agency ANSA reported that 2 people had died, although this has not yet been independently verified. Well, joining us to discuss this strike and the ramifications is Mark Sutherland, a geopolitical commentator who joins us from London. Mark, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. This reported attack on the only Catholic church in Gaza comes with condemnation from Giorgia Meloni. How impactful could these comments from the Italian Prime Minister be, given recent questions asked about Israeli military action by global leaders in Gaza?
Good to join you again, Joshua. Thank you. Of course, as you've said in the opening statement there, we are waiting for more news, things to be verified. The Israeli forces will be looking into this. Without using that word too often, but we have to remember a particular context, which is that Hamas on the 7th of October killed 1,200 Israeli citizens a load of other injuries, and the way some of that was played out was extremely barbaric and absolutely appalling. The worst pogrom since the show of the Holocaust during the Second World War. I say that to say this: that the Israeli forces are fighting a terrorist group. The tunnel system under there is the equivalent of the London Underground or the New York subway. These, sadly, in war, appalling things happen. We have to wait and to get all of the information out. I'm sure that deliberately, no, they are not wanting to target the only Catholic church in there. The other thing is that, Joshua, when we say things like the only Catholic church, it adds to the emotion of that. When Hamas say, the health ministry, that frankly we cannot go by the figures that they give in regard to the amount of deaths, because everything that comes out of Gaza is controlled by Hamas. Now, the Israelis are working hard to defeat a terrorist organization. They are fighting a battle like no other army of urban warfare. There is no other army that is fighting it in the way that they do and has to deal with it in the way that they are actually doing. And I would just say this: it's very interesting that people are so quick to comment on this. I understand why. But why are people not also commenting of the genocide that is carrying out against the Druze in southern Syria at this present time? Whenever it involves Israel, whenever it involves the Jewish state, the only Jewish state in the world, people are quickly to pile in and condemn. And I end with saying we have to wait until all the facts are on the table. That may take some time. And the problem is with our news cycle, we want instant reactions when we don't have all the facts in front of it.
Of course, and Mark, with that context, it is of course important, as you've mentioned, to state that these are reports. They have not yet been verified. That process is made more difficult, of course, because of the limiting number of journalists allowed into Gaza. A lot of the information is based off Gaza-based journalists who, of course, that is questioned, the validity of those claims. But Mark, I do want to look at a potential, if this is verified, if the information is confirmed, should there be individual accountability on someone who has potentially made a mistake with targeting this church and potentially injuring the priest? Or is this a wider question about Israel's offensive as a whole?
Well, one of the big issues is this, Joshua, is that the Israeli army conforms, does incredible work, incredible checks to then conform to the Geneva Convention of 1949. Now, the issue is this, is that you are then fighting a terrorist group that does not adhere to the Geneva Convention one iota, hence the 50 hostages, dead or alive, that they are still being held, that I don't think any particular aid agency has actually visited them at all. This is the duality of the actual situation. You and I would need a couple of hours to go back through the history, the formation of Hamas, how many rockets they've been firing into Israel since 2007, the withdrawal from there, etc., that when Israel then said, right, we'll try this two-state solution, we would withdraw. All of those facts, and this is what is unfortunate, because many people do not want to discuss the history and put these facts on the table. Now, any death on both sides is tragic. Frankly, war is dreadful. But as I say, Israel didn't start this, but it also cannot have a group of terrorists on its border. And these terrorists also, Hamas then terrorized the population, even though, as we have seen, that members of UNRWA, etc., this aid fund that various Western countries then fund, including the UN, via the UN, then had Israeli hostages in their homes. Now, as I say, I bestow on any country, no other country would accept this, where you have a terrorist organization right on your doorstep, going over your border, taking your members of your population, civilians, and then taking them back into the country, and the rest. Would the rest of us actually put up with this? And that goes back to the second half of your question, which is, would this have an effect? The problem is about a ceasefire. It then gives Hamas time to rearm, and then let's put this in context as well. No time when you're actually fighting an enemy are you then feeding them at the same time and then funding them with the resources to be able to sell that, to keep funding your actions, in this case from Hamas against Israel. Because every time food supplies go in there, until recently when an American aid agency has then taken that over, they would then take that food and sell that at inflated prices to the civilians within to the Palestinian people within Gaza. Okay, and Joshua, yes, it's complex. It is complex. In many ways is not as simple, because we always have to look at the thing that's going on. It's a bit when people constantly say to Israel, there's got to be proportionality. That is a massive subject in itself. No other army seeks to move the population where they're trying to defeat these terrorists in this situation in the way that they do. No other army does that. And we have to then look at the previous practices of America and British within the Middle East, and how they then conducted out sadly in regard to civilian casualties. Israel is incredible at the work that it does here, but as I say, any casualty on both sides is tragic and is with great regret.
Yes, absolutely, Mark. Thank you ever so much for your time. We, of course, will await concrete information relating to that potential strike on the Catholic Church in Gaza City and bring that to you as we get it. But we now move over to Europe. Russia has handed over the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers as part of an agreement reached at last month's peace talks in Istanbul. That, according to Moscow's chief negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky. In return, Ukraine transferred the bodies of 19 Russian soldiers. While ceasefire talks have failed to make headway, exchanges of prisoners and fallen soldiers remain one of the few functioning channels of diplomacy in the ongoing war. Peace talks in Turkey last month broke down after Russia demanded territorial concessions and an end to Western military support for Ukraine. Ukraine called the demands unacceptable ultimatums. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has urged Moscow to agree to a ceasefire, but Russia has so far rejected all such calls. Well, joining us to discuss this development and the wider ramifications of this ongoing war, Professor Veselin Popovsky, a professor and vice dean at the Jindal Global Law School, who is joining us from Bulgaria. Thank you ever so much, Professor Popovsky. Let's first look at the announcement that 1,000 Ukrainian bodies of fallen soldiers have been passed over. Diplomacy, of course, has been limited, but those direct talks in Istanbul, a second round, have led to concrete action between Russia and Ukraine. How much of a positive can be taken out of that, and the fact that it is moving forward as planned and progressing as said at those meetings? How positive is that truly for a potential peace deal in the face of, let's be honest, uncertainty over whether peace is a reality?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. The exchange of prisoners of war is a very normal in every conflict. Between the worst enemy, always it happens. And there's nothing unusual. It shouldn't be even a news. Usually, even, allied soldiers exchange happen all the time between every parties in every conflict. Yes, you correctly said it was agreed during the second round in Istanbul. Finally, it happened. We understand because of logistics, it needs time to happen. I will ask why they keep dead bodies at all. And back to your conversation about Hamas and Israel, why Hamas keep the dead body of hostages? It's logistically difficult even for the party that keeps the dead bodies. So this is very normal in war, armed conflict. So I wouldn't put much positive news here because we still, as you mentioned, Joshua, still we don't see much progress on the real negotiations about ceasefire. Russia continues to bomb civilians in the Ukrainian cities. Russia continues to demand territorial gains simply because it cannot achieve anything on the military side, on the battlefield. Russia continues to reject ceasefire, and these are important. So for that matter, what is needed is to continue strong pressure on Russia to agree on a ceasefire. Everybody else agree on ceasefire unconditionally. The Ukrainians, the Europeans, even the Trump administration demand ceasefire for many months. Already 6 months ago, that was already launched. But Russia is non-cooperative here. So just returning thousands of dead bodies doesn't make Russia a truthful partner in negotiations.
Yes, and Professor Popovsky, if you stay with us, we're now going to focus our attention solely on Ukraine, which has a new Prime Minister. Yulia Svyrydenko has been officially appointed by lawmakers in Kyiv, becoming the first woman in Ukraine's modern history to hold the post. The 39-year-old rose to prominence this year during tense negotiations with the United States over a rare minerals deal, talks that nearly strained Kyiv's ties with Washington. Svyrydenko replaces Denys Shmyhal, who served as Prime Minister since 2020 and was the longest-serving head of government since Ukraine's independence. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he had recommended Economy Minister Yulia Svyrydenko to become Prime Minister on the 14th of July. Professor Popovsky, thank you for staying with us. I'd like to get some clarity from you on what this move signals. Of course, the announcement is there. We knew this was coming. Zelensky pointed towards that reshuffle. But is this a moment of weakness for Zelensky, who acknowledges that the current setup in his government team wasn't working, or is this Zelensky trying to streamline the process and actually show strength of leadership?
Absolutely. I think, well, on one hand, it is a routine change of prime minister. As you mentioned, Denys Shmyhal was there for already 5 years. So usually in democratic countries, prime ministers are routinely replaced. We know very well Yulia Svyrydenko, as you said, Joshua. She was the one who negotiated with the United States the minerals deals, and these were not easy negotiations with the Trump administration, as we remember. And she did very well. She got high respect in Washington, D.C. She's very well respected everywhere in Europe and the rest of the world. So kind of, I'll say this is a very natural, normal, routine promotion of Yulia Svyrydenko as a prime minister. Good news, obviously. Zelensky supporting her, also a good news. Very knowledgeable and highly skilled and professional as Yulia Svyrydenko will be the prime minister. I will regard this as a good news. There is nothing to worry about. Ukraine is a democratic country moving ahead. Changes are very normal. It's the other way around. In Moscow, we don't see changes because those people stay for life in power. They worry to get out of office because they could be killed or imprisoned. So in Ukraine, as a democratic country, what happened with the new prime minister is welcomed by everybody. She will be respected everywhere, including in Washington, D.C., which is important, as we know, for the future relationship between Ukraine and the United States.
Yes, Professor Veselin Popovsky, I'd like to thank you ever so much for joining us on both of those topics. We will, of course, continue to bring you all updates from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and diplomacy within both nations. But we move now to some breaking news, and according to reports by the White House, US President Donald Trump is officially scheduled to visit the United Kingdom from September the 17th to September the 19th of this year. Now, this directly contradicts reports by Pakistani local media, which we brought you earlier in the programme, suggesting that he would travel to Pakistan on the 18th of that month. Just to clarify, a confirmation of that schedule, highlighting that reports that we brought you earlier from certain media outlets contradict that of the dates that were given. So just to clarify that for you, and of course we will continue to have a look at the diplomacy between Donald Trump's administration, the United Kingdom, and a potential visit to Pakistan as we get any information through. Moving on now, the President of the Federation of Indian Pilots, Charanveer Singh Randhawa, has strongly pushed back against what he calls premature blame being placed on the flight crew of the deadly Air India crash. His remarks follow a Wall Street Journal report suggesting investigators are focusing on the captain's possible role in the crash, including allegations he may have cut fuel flow to the engines based on cockpit voice recordings. Let's have a listen to that statement.
I would like to condemn, firstly, such reports which are directly bearing an effect on the pilots' fraternity without any evidence whatsoever. The preliminary report nowhere states that the pilots have moved the fuel control switches, and this has been corroborated by the CVR recording. Let the investigation team investigate in detail, and to further state, the Honorable Minister for Civil Aviation has already stated on the 12th of July, where he said very clearly this is a preliminary report and we should wait and have patience till the time the final report comes. And we issued yesterday a press statement condemning any such views to be aired in which case that which affects the morale of the pilots.
Well, joining us to discuss this development, Dr. Sanat Kaul, the chairman of the International Foundation for Aviation and Drones. Thank you ever so much for being here. Of course, condemnation continuing to come in after this frankly questionable report from the Wall Street Journal. That condemnation clear, an investigation not yet concluded, but a narrative being pushed by a paper that of course has no direct links to aviation or even this investigation. So can I please get your thoughts on that and an understanding of why the Wall Street Journal have chosen to release this report with a title saying the truth about the Air India crash?
Well, what has been given out is a preliminary report, not the final report. Final report will take probably much longer, up to a year, which is permitted by International Civil Aviation Organization. Now, in this preliminary report, there are a lot of issues where there are, it's not a complete report. So it gives something and does not give the full. At the same time, now there are two groups. First of all, it seems that it was the electrical switches or the electrical system which failed, and it did not allow the aircraft engines to work. Who did it? Was it a software glitch or was it done by a pilot? These are the two issues. And both sides, I mean, the Pilots Association has been saying it is not the pilots who did it. And the other side, with the Wall Street Journal and others, the American side or the US side or some side, I don't want to take names, are saying that it was the pilot. So we are now at a crossroad where whether we have to, the inquiry will determine whether it was a pilot error, and pilot error would be a suicidal error. So it's very serious. And the other side is that there are glitches in the software and in the malfunctioning of the system. And this is not the first time it's happened. It's happened many times. In fact, in one landing of the same Dreamliner, the engines got switched off. But since it was landing, nothing happened. The pilots were able to land, stop the aircraft, and then I presume it was towed away. So these are very serious issues in the aircraft engine and engineering and software. So these are both issues are there. And I don't think it's time to speculate on either side. So journalists and vested interests will carry on giving one-sided response, but I don't accept that either way. I think we need to wait for the final report to determine what actually went wrong.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Sanat Kaul, thank you ever so much for joining us. We, of course, will bring you further information and reaction from that Wall Street Journal report ahead of that final investigative report on the devastating crash. We move on now, and Pakistan is grappling with the aftermath of relentless monsoon rains that have left at least 54 people dead and over 200 injured across the country. The worst hit region is Punjab, where the majority of casualties have been reported. Streets remain flooded, emergency services are on high alert, and rescue operations are underway as authorities work to manage the growing crisis. The government of Rawalpindi has declared a public holiday today to keep people at home, with the National Meteorological Department warning that heavy rain would continue until Friday. The United States has condemned recent drone attacks on the Kurdistan region of Iraq, stating they jeopardise the country's stability and economic future. Washington emphasised Iraq's responsibility to protect its territory and citizens. The attacks, which have targeted strategic energy infrastructure and foreign-operated oil fields, have raised concerns over Iraq's security. The US reiterated its commitment to supporting Iraq in building a stable and sovereign state. Well, that is all we have time for, but we'll be back very soon with more of your latest breaking world news.